Jack Boland has literally changed the lives of thousands of people, and he can help you change yours. The following lessons are designed to give you the information and inspiration you need to make your life what it can be. This program is entitled Masterminding, the Way to Success and Happiness. And now, Jack Boland.
Carl Jung said, "The intimate connection between God and the soul precludes any under-evaluation of the soul. It may be going too far to speak of a family relationship between God and soul. Yet the soul must possess some possibility of contact with God, that is to say, something which corresponds to the divine essence. Otherwise, no association could ever have taken place." Well, that seemingly complex statement is really saying to you and to me that it is really possible to have a personal, friendly, family type of relationship with the creative intelligence that has formed and shaped this magnificent universe. Whatever you call that intelligence, God, or any other name, it is possible for every person to have a continuous, conscious, satisfying, life-changing, mind-embellishing personal relationship with that presence. There is within each one of us a dimension of power and of wisdom that we have experienced, a moment here and a moment there. Those moments of greatness, of joy, of excitement, there have been times in your life when you have transcended your normal state. Is that correct? Now, you wished that you could spend hours or days or an eternity in that higher level of love and of understanding. And ultimately, we will be living from that superconsciousness of power, of insight. Our problem is that we have not yet learned who we truly are. I was sitting here tonight watching you, most of you, as you arrived here in this large room that we call our sanctuary. And I felt so good about you that there was a smile on my face that seemed to stretch from ear to ear. I saw you probably more clearly than you have ever seen yourself in your life. And as you were sitting there, I had this vision of the Empire Strikes Back and little Yoda, that very small but powerful entity that had great wisdom, insight, and the ability to levitate or to raise that spacecraft out of the muck. And if you saw The Empire Strikes Back, you know the scene that I'm referring to. Who was the character that crashed the plane? Luke Skywalker, right? You recall his astonishment when he saw Yoda levitate the plane. And yet you were not surprised. Were you surprised when you saw that event taking place? It was a very normal event. Something inside you caused you to believe that you also have that same ability. I don't mean that you can practice it yet, but you know that that is your normal state. And as a matter of fact, Luke was told that he could do it if he could believe that he could do it. Coming to believe in our true identity is necessary to the experiencing of that identity. And I believe that you and I will spend one of the most important times that we could ever possibly share with each other, because we will be discussing a system of thought that will give us the ability to begin to achieve levels of freedom, to discover and to experience capabilities that so far have only been suspected in us. I see you as an unlimited person, not confined to the habit patterns of your life, not confined to what you've believed about yourself prior to this moment. You are more than you've ever believed about yourself, and so am I. And so am I. It's very difficult for one person to break out of their own belief system unaided. As a matter of fact, it's almost impossible. It is impossible. You can have all the books, the cassette tapes, and an intense desire to grow and to be changed. But until two or more persons come together with that desire and intensity of feeling, that change will not take place. Now, one of the most powerful statements that I ever read was a poem in the front of a small but very powerful book entitled As a Man Thinketh. That poem reads like this: Mind, the master power that molds and makes, and man is mind. Evermore he takes the tools of thought and, shaping what he wills, brings forth 1,000 joys, 1,000 ills. He thinks in secret, but it comes to pass. Environment is but his looking glass. All of the days that you and I have been on this planet, we've been using the tools of thought. We've been thinking and feeling and visualizing, using our creative imagination, daydreaming and conceptualizing and fantasizing. And we've been speaking the word. You have the power to declare a thing to be true, and it becomes true for you. That's one of the tools of thought, your ability to take an idea that comes into the intellect. It may come off the pages of a book, or that idea may leap into your mind, and you take that idea and you see it. You come to intellectually understand it. It is something that is there. And you can speak it, you can say it. More than that, you can take the fabric of your feeling nature, your desire to have that experience come alive or come true for you, and wrap your love around it, and as you do, you are causing the seed or the sperm to be planted into the soil or the ovum of the feeling nature. Man, taking the tools of thought, shaping what he wills, brings forth 1,000 joy, 1,000 ills. He thinks in secret. You and I have believed that what took place in our mind really didn't matter as long as they didn't catch us thinking it. Right? As long as we didn't say it. Think, 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 talk, 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 smile, smile, smile. You really don't know what's going on in here. Oh, but yes, we do know what's going on in there. Environment is but your looking glass. Aha! Look at your life. Look at the circumstances of your life. There. That's what you have been thinking and feeling. And someone might say, well, there's not much there. How do you know that that's what I've been thinking? Well, that's what you've been thinking. Not much there. Not much there. I don't deserve very much there. But the law is that as a person thinks in their heart, your heart is how you feel, so is your experience. Now, this is basic truth, isn't it? These are the ABCs of our intellectual and spiritual understanding. But it's important to, as we go through these steps together, to see how our minds work. The dictionary defines mind as the spirit of consciousness. Mind is the spirit of consciousness. Well, I would also define mind, for our purposes, as capital M-I-N-D, as a synonym for God, or for Spirit, or for the Holy Spirit. And I know that if I equate mind with God, that for a moment there's someone who might almost feel offended, because God is God. But wait a second. The mystics and the prophets have all told us that we live and move and have our being in God, and that God is spirit. So, mind is another name for spirit. It's very important for us from time to time to change the words that we use about life, because as we change our words, we can begin to have a different understanding and a different experience. For example, for many people, the word God has meant that large, male, bearded person who resides in a special place in the sky beyond the range of the largest telescope, a place called heaven. And that God is observing us from afar, marking down on that huge blackboard in the sky all those things. All those things. Didn't miss a one of those things. Right? Well, that was not a friendly God. And did I not read to you a moment ago that intuitively we know, because we hunger for a personal relationship with the Creator of all things. And how could we hunger unless that possibility existed? And why did the master teacher challenge the people of his day by calling God our Father? That was blasphemy in those times. What he was saying to us is that God is personal, and you can have that personal experience, providing that you know the system, providing that you understand how to fulfill the conditions for that more dynamic and rewarding personalized relationship in which you experience certain benefits that are otherwise denied. And those benefits would be an acceleration of insight or wisdom, understanding, the accelerated experience of power, increased power. And power is the ability to do the things that you need to do. That's what power is. God has been defined as the moving force in the universe, and spirit is the breath of life in all creation, the principle of creative intelligence and life. Now, there have been moments here and there when you and I have had this ecstasy feeling. Might have been at the moment of birth of your child. It certainly was when you were in love, but God, or the mastermind, is love, and so when we are in love, we are in God, and that is a mind-expanding experience, is it not? It certainly breaks us out of all of our old sense of limitation. Those moments were really previews of coming attraction. In those experiences, you felt as though you were a giant. Maybe not a giant, but there was something special about you and something special about your destiny. In those moments, you lost all fear. How would you like to live all of your days without any fear? How would you like to live in a state of mind in which it would be absolutely impossible to be afraid? Would you like that? That's your destiny. And you can experience that state of mind providing that you know the system that will permit you to enter into that state of higher consciousness. How would you like to live the rest of your life knowing with absolute certainty that you will always be at exactly the right place, at precisely the right moment, to experience the things that have already been arranged for you to experience? How would you like to live that way? Do you know that the ordinary state of mind is that most people are absolutely certain that they are at the wrong place, at the right time, and the siren that's in the distance is for them. It's their house burning down, or their spouse just had an accident, because they know that they're a terrible driver anyhow. Well, it's possible for you to live knowing and actually experiencing being at the right place at the right time all of the time, to have the precise experiences that have been designed by you because you've learned the system of cooperating with the creative intelligence. There are men and women who live out their lives on this planet in precisely the manner that I'm describing to you. And I know that this is true because I know some of them. Many of them are in this room tonight. There are others scattered around on this planet. And you can have that exalted experience. Not just a moment here and a moment there, but you can have it with an increased momentum, building more stately mansions for your soul or for your consciousness. But you have to know the system. Higher consciousness is not something that happens automatically, nor does it occur because you were born of your mother, nor will it happen because you belong to a church or a synagogue. It comes as the result of fulfilling certain very specific but easily understood and practiced spiritual principles or laws. And that's what we're talking about in this series of lessons. We're talking about the mastermind system. Actually, we're talking about the Tao, the way. And the Tao is an ancient spiritual system that has been given to man many, many times in different forms. And the Tao, means the way. It means the way out of our ordinary human condition and into our extraordinary super consciousness or Christ consciousness condition. It's how to be that super self that you were destined to be. There is a super mind, an infinite presence, a mastermind, a super self, a Christ mind, a super consciousness. There's no question about it. And that higher consciousness knows everything there is to know and is able to accomplish all the things that it knows. And it has the ability to empower you to understand, to experience, to do all that you can possibly conceive of. Now, it cannot empower you apart from itself. It empowers you as a living expression of itself. You and I are not separate and apart from that higher self. It is in us just as we are in it. The good news is that we don't have to force this higher consciousness, this super self, upon us. As a matter of fact, it has been waiting patiently for us to awaken, to come to ourselves, if you will, and to return to our natural estate. You see, that part of us that suffers and the part of us that is afraid, that believes it cannot accomplish, that it cannot do, That's the least part of us, our human condition, and that is not our natural self. That is the persona, the mask, that has no right to exist longer than it takes us to acknowledge and seek our higher identity. A number of years ago, I had an experience of surrendering. And in that experience, I became aware of these things that I'm sharing with you. And I also knew that I was not the only person who had had a similar experience, that it's possible for all of us. Shortly after that experience, I found myself at the right place at the right time to pick up the books that were placed in my hand. I did not have to seek them. They were there. I found myself at exactly the right place, meeting the people that I needed to meet. They were there. They were there. This is an incredible universe. It's so intelligent. God is so smart, so bright, so alive, so incredibly loving and caring. I did not know that. And then I began to have that exciting experience. It was as though I had been born on a new planet. The planet Earth turned into the most incredibly beautiful and alive and growing, and this is a super place to be. One of the first books that came into my hand was this book by Napoleon Hill, entitled Think and Grow Rich. And the word rich does not just mean materially wealthy. Rich means having all the things that you need to have, including a higher state of consciousness. I opened this book and could not put it down until I had read every sentence. And then I read from cover to cover again, because it was the truth as I was experiencing the truth. One of the incredible chapters in this book is Step 9, Toward Riches. The power of the mastermind. And Napoleon Hill makes some startling statements about the mastermind, but the mastermind, he's talking about the creative intelligence that has formed, shaped the universe. He's very careful in his book not to call the mastermind God. And he states over and over again that this is not a religious book at all, that a person with any religious background or none can come to understand these universal laws and practice them. Even an agnostic or an atheist can come into this understanding and practice it, and that's true. But Mr. Hill says that no individual may have great power without availing himself of the mastermind. And it's true. He goes further to say that nothing great has ever happened except through a mastermind coalition. And I believe that. I simply, and it's been my experience and my observation, looking back, looking over my lifetime, and reading back through history. The great events, the life-changing events, the earth-shaping events that have taken place were all the result of a mastermind alliance. Sometimes that mastermind alliance was not formally declared. It was not known or stated by the persons who were cooperating with each other. But invariably, if something great takes place and continues to exist, it's the result of a mastermind alliance. And a mastermind alliance is two or more people coming together in a spirit of perfect harmony and love, working for the individual and mutual goals upon which they agree, believing in and relating themselves to a power greater than themselves, a universal force working not only for their own good, but for the good of all mankind. So that every effort that they make, every thought that they think, is consistent with the laws of the universe, with the laws of love, with the laws of good. Knowing, therefore, that they cannot and will not deprive any other person of anything that they might have gained. As a matter of fact, they have an intense desire to help all other persons, including and especially themselves. That's a brief outline of what the mastermind principle was to Napoleon Hill. And he did not understand this, except that he'd been commissioned, spent 20 years of his life interviewing the great and successful persons of that era, of that time. And from them, he discovered this great principle. And it's so obvious when you begin to understand it. Now, one of the persons who became impressed with the work of Napoleon Hill was W. Clement Stone. W. Clement Stone always had a burning desire to succeed. And he was a newsboy at the age of 6. And then when he became 16 years of age, he began selling life insurance. And he said, I sold insurance the way I sold newspapers. I learned to recognize the principles of a given activity, to relate them to the needs of a different activity, and to carry them into new circumstances. By the age of 16, W. Clement Stone had read 50 Horatio Alger books. Now, this generation probably is not aware of Horatio Alger, but those books were inspirational books 2 generations ago. And I see some of us nodding our heads. Oh, Horatio Alger was, wow. He had an indomitable spirit. There was nothing that he could not do, and he did it. You read his books and you were really turned on, believing that you could succeed also. In time, W. Clement Stone became advisor to presidents, founder of the flourishing business empire, and he proved to himself that these success principles, these universal laws, can work for anyone and for everyone, and he has spent a lifetime helping other people. When he was 16 years of age, he developed his own magnificent obsession, and this is his magnificent obsession, and I quote, I resolved, and have not deviated from this resolve, to change this world and make it a better place for this and all future generations. And through the application of the same principles that helped me succeed in business, it is being done. I mention this with the hope and expectation that you will develop your own magnificent obsession and share with others the blessings that God has bestowed upon you. It's impossible to become involved with the mastermind principle if one is self-seeking only. And I must remind you of that up front. If all that you're looking for is your own good, you will not find it. You will not find it. It is impossible to find it. It cannot be derived. And if one does experience their own good for themselves alone, they will lose it. They will be destroyed by what appears to be their very success. And I could give you scores of examples. Time does not permit, and I don't need to. You have your own examples in your own mind. So, one of the first principles that we're going to work with now is this concept, this idea. In order for me to achieve my good, in order for me to achieve the consciousness that I seek, the relationship with God that is my divine heritage, in order for me to demonstrate the prosperity and the fullness of life that my heart desires, I must develop an intense desire to help my brothers and my sisters, to help the world to the same extent that I desire to be helped. And this cannot just be an idea that exists in my mind. I must become involved with other persons like myself, lending my energy, my love, on a personal basis to aid them and to support them and to sustain them in their search for their own unfolding destiny. And I cannot do this unless I become involved in the mastermind consciousness and with a mastermind group. It's important to understand, because we have believed that we could sit home in the lotus position or by ourselves or pray and achieve the good that our hearts desires, and we cannot. W. Clement Stone said, "What a thrill it was to know, even as a child, that I possessed the greatest machine ever conceived. So awesome that it could only be created by God himself, and that I could operate and use this machine effectively to deliberately direct my thoughts, control my emotions, and achieve any worthwhile goals that did not violate the laws of God and the rights of my fellow man." An incredible statement. What a thrill it was to know that I possessed the greatest machine ever conceived. Do you have any idea what that machine is? Was that a jet plane that was going to carry him to some distant place to find his good? You know what it was? It was mine. Your mind is the most incredible machine that has ever been created, and it had to be created by God himself, and it is an exact replica of God's own mind. As a matter of fact, it is the mind of God in you. Isn't that remarkable? Your mind works in the very same way that the mind that is formed and the mind that maintains this universe works. It is the master mind that molds and makes. Then we, who have been created by it, not only have the right, but we have the responsibility to be connected to it and to experience all that it is and all that it has. Now, as I make this statement to you, go back and in your mind hear some of the statements out of the ancient scriptures. All that the Father has is mine. All the cattle on 1,000 hills are mine. It is our Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Good pleasure. Not resentful, angry response. Good pleasure. All the energy and all the power of the universe is ours. Now, if this is true, why have we been so diminished? Only because we have separated ourselves through our thinking from that higher consciousness. But we have a success mechanism. Your mind is a success machine. And I don't just mean material success. I mean that you have the ability in you to achieve anything your heart desires. To get answers to problems, to invent, to write poetry, to run a business, to sell merchandise, to explore new horizons in any chosen field, to achieve success in any other activity which is intimately tied into your life to make you a richer, fuller, happier, wiser, more creative person. And I believe that this was the good news of the Gospels. This is what those marvelous people were saying to us. A few years ago, when we were in our other church, and if you're here for the first time or two, I want you to know that that building was not exactly like this one. It was about the size of our garage, a little larger perhaps. We immediately, when we started getting together in that building, following classes like this, we would spend some time together sharing refreshments. And that's always an excuse for us to come together in this fellowship of consciousness. We bought an 80-cup coffee maker. And that 80-cup coffee maker took about 35 minutes to brew the 80 cups. And I'm sure you've seen one of those large pots. And you put the water in and the coffee in and plug it in, and it sputters and spumes and gurgles, and after a while it makes coffee. It makes quite a bit of noise while it's making coffee, and we grew. More of us kept showing up, and we bought the second coffee pot. And we bought the third one, and the fourth one, and would you believe we bought the sixth one? And we had coffee sputtering like you wouldn't believe, and plugged into the sockets that we had. We kept blowing fuses, and the fuses were in the men's room. It was a problem. But we were so conditioned to the problem that we did not know that it was a problem. We thought it was great that we had 6 coffee pots. There was a time when we only had 1. So we had really grown, hadn't we? And one day, someone said, well, why don't we purchase a commercial coffee maker? And it took us a day or two to think about that, because we were not so sure that we deserved anything as exotic as a commercial coffee maker. After all, we had 6 coffee pots. Well, he could get a deal, and he got a deal. That meant we had to install it ourselves. And so the day that we were to install our commercial coffee maker was Saturday. And we all arrived at the building at the same time, and I went back into the kitchen with them and watched for about 15 minutes, and I went back to my office to make some notes for the Sunday's lesson. In the middle of the afternoon, they were still working. Late in the afternoon, they thought they had it ready. About 6 guys working. I'd been back about every half hour, and there was one time when they had it all taken apart and down on the floor, and they said it doesn't work, there's something wrong with it. They sent us a faulty one, but we can fix it. And they just about tore it apart fixing it. But they had it fixed, and they called me back, and because I was the minister, they let me punch the button. They had plugged into the socket, and the water was in it, and the coffee was there, and I pushed the button, and we all smiled. And nothing much happened. The little wheel sort of turned on the side, and it went. The sickliest brew that you ever saw came out of that coffee maker. And this time it was late in the day, and I said, well, tomorrow we'll go back to our 6 coffee pots. I'll call the mechanic on Monday and tell him to come and repair this commercial coffee pot. On Monday he came with his bag of tools, and I took him back to the kitchen, and I said, look at that. It doesn't work. And he dropped his tool bag, just laughing and laughing. He said, there's nothing wrong with your coffee maker. I said, there is so. He said, it's wired for 220. You have it plugged into 110. He plugged it into 220, and it worked like a charm. As a matter of fact, it's still working. It's right back there in our kitchen. Now, has your life almost worked? Have there been those days and times when you were almost able to do the things that you needed to do? When you almost understood? When you could almost achieve? When you got started but never quite finished? What about all those times when you kind of took yourself apart and you couldn't find anything that was broken, but it still wouldn't work? You know what the problem was? Simple. You're wired for 220, but you've just been plugged into 110, that's all. And the mastermind principle is the way to be plugged in to the universal power source of 220 volts. And more than that, you're perfectly capable of 440. You'll have some 440 moments. What about 880? In my Father's house are many power sources, many levels of consciousness. But you have to know the system. We have to have the way into that higher state of beingness, and that's what the mastermind principle is all about. All genius is the result of being in touch with this 4th dimension of wisdom and power. You're a genius. Did you know that? Almost takes your breath away when I tell you that you're a genius. You probably are remembering the grades you made in school, the last time you took a test. Well, you are a genius. You're a prodigy. The word genius comes from the Latin word meaning guardian spirit. There it is again, guardian spirit. You live and move and have your being in spirit, mind, the mastermind that molds and makes. And it is a guardian spirit. It is a caring spirit. It is a loving spirit, responsive. It is a creative spirit. And it has made you for itself. You were designed to be the channel through whom it expresses its glory. Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, of your spirit. Paul said, Webster defines genius as exceptional or transcendent intellectual and creative power. And that's really what it is. You have within you an exceptional, transcendent intellectual and creative power. And it's exciting to know that you don't have to turn spirit on. It's there. The power is on. We plugged into 220 volts and it was there. When you and I plug into spirit, it is there. And it is what it is. Jesus was always making statements, I believe, attempting to show us the nature of our relationship with that super self of us, that higher power of us. And he was saying that these things that I do, you can do them. Greater things. What are the greater things? Well, the greater things are those natural things that you need to do, the things that you need to achieve and to accomplish in your own life. Your life is the perfect laboratory. Your life is the ideal place for you to begin to experiment, to prove that these ideas are true. You are where you meet God. It is within your own experience that you will discover and experience God. Next week we'll be talking about the natural mastermind arrangements. Now, for example, a board of directors is a natural mastermind arrangement. The marriage partnership is a natural mastermind arrangement. People who belong to Alcoholics Anonymous are caught up in the most fabulous, powerful mastermind group that probably exists in the world today. But that's a collective group that all are not privileged to be a part of. Next week, we'll be talking about some specific mastermind groups, and we'll be moving into the establishment of a personal group for you to experience. This week I'd like for you to observe, as you move toward the time that we come together again, I'd like for you to observe that all of your relationships, all of your friendships are not of the order of the mastermind. Some of them have been self-defeating. Do you understand what I'm talking about? And as you observe this week, become willing to step out of the circumstances that have not been to your advantage and willing to move into larger and more exciting experiences and relationships that will enhance your life. Ralph Waldo Trine said, to the degree that we come into the recognition of our own true selves, into the realization of the oneness of our life with the infinite life, and in the degree that we open ourselves to this divine inflow, does the voice of intuition, this voice of the soul, this voice of God speak clearly. And in the degree that we recognize, listen to, and obey it, does it speak ever more clearly, until by and by there comes the time when it's unerring, absolutely unerring in its guidance. You're the beloved of God. You are. And that's the way, it really is. God bless you.
This concludes the lesson on Side A. Now, please fast forward to the end and turn the cassette over for the continuation of Masterminding, the Way to Success and Happiness.